All right, we're recording. Hello, everyone. Today, July 25th, and that's official community meeting for Project Velero. As such, please follow the code of conduct and just be nice to each other. With that said, I see many folks are adding themselves into the community meeting notes. I'm going to share that link again to the chat. It will be super cool if you add yourself, and so we can keep track of who's joining and who's interested into our project. With that, I'm not sure if it makes sense to share because there are many topics for other folks, and I'm going to give the mic to Scott.
Yeah, sure. On the pure upstream side, mostly I've just been involved in ongoing code reviews, starting in my own environment, trying to test out the Copia and also the data mover based on Copia in an OADP environment, trying to kind of see what works and what doesn't in that environment to kind of figure that out. Actually involved in in a Slack discussion, running into some issues where I'm getting an error from the Copia backup repository in it saying that the repository is not empty, even though I haven't used Copia before, but maybe a configuration issue. Started the conversation on the Velero dev Slack channel. I'm also talking internally in Red Hat to someone who's already successfully done this using just the builds from the upstream release, not in an ODP context. So kind of working through that, but basically we're trying to make sure that all this stuff works, obviously just as well in the ODP environment as it does in the pure Velero environment. So.
Scott, we did test the block, not the block, sorry, the regular file system PVC using the latest data mover, and it worked.
Yeah, it must be something. I'm guessing either in the configuration, or there may be something weird in my bucket that somehow is not coming out very well in the errors. Even though I've been, this bucket works just fine, for example, for RESTIC. It also may be a configuration issue since, I didn't create, instead of using the standard Velero installer, we're using the ODP kind of that uses it's based on the installer. So there may be some configuration issues there as well. I'm just trying to work through those issues now. But I'm running into the same problem for data mover and just Copia file system backup because it's happening on the validation of the backup repository itself. Basically, when it calls the repo init, I'm getting an error from the code saying that there's already data in the bucket. So I'm not really sure exactly yet. Again, I maybe misconfiguration or maybe something weird with my bucket permissions. I just know that this bucket's been fine for RESTIC backups and everything else. So I just, got to look out the bucket side and also maybe the configuration side. So still working through that.
Right.
You can see the thread on Velero dev as well.
Sorry. Are you sharing this bucket between multiple backups, different backups?
Yeah, I mean, this is a bucket I've been using. So I have existing backups, from RESTIC, for example, but I'm assuming that should still work because, for example, if you're using, you got your bucket, you're using RESTIC, you make a backup, you then reconfigure Velero to use Copia and then restart. Velero restarts. That should work because I know the code, for example, for restoring bases whether using RESTIC versus Copia on what's in the backup. So it should be able to use the bucket from because again, the RESTIC and the Copia are in separate folders in the S3 buckets. So there shouldn't be any action there unless there's an issue with configuration.
Right. No, that is right. Yeah, it should be able to work. Yeah.
Just to add to what Scott is saying, Scott, I tried it out. I was also getting the same error.
You were okay.
Yeah, init error. It didn't work for me as well.
Okay, got it.
I didn't take a RESTIC backup. I just changed the uploader type and kicked in a new backup. So
yeah, and it looks like Prasad was saying he was able to do this with just a straight upstream install. So I'm going to look at his if he can reproduce it. I'm going to look at his because it's not even on taking the backup. It's what's happening is that when you create the backup, you create the backup repository, and then the backup repository init and validation is where it's failing. And I went in and deleted the Velero/Copia in a folder in the backup repository in S3, and then deleted my backup repository, tried again. And so it seems like it's doing something on initialization, which may be creating something, which then it complains it's not empty. I'm not sure. Maybe the non-empty test is somehow looking elsewhere in the bucket. So in your bucket, where you hit the same issue, was it a
Same.
bucket you'd used before, or was it completely empty?
No, it was completely empty. So I
Okay,
wanted to
so in
try
your
out
case, so a
call,
completely empty bucket, you're still getting the same error.
Yeah. So I had one question, like, should the restrict identifier be same as?
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's why I was when Prasad gets this environment up again, I was going to look at the actual metadata. You know, what are his server args, and what is the backup repository? Because yeah, that was a thing was weird to me. I didn't understand, but I haven't looked at this in detail to see is that the actual backup repository for a copia, the copia type still has a restic identifier URL in it, which uses that restic path. So I don't know if that's what's messing it up, and if so, how is that getting in there?
Okay.
Especially in your backup, because you had an empty bucket, nothing in there, started with copia uploader type, unless there's some server arg we're missing that
install time
Velero installer includes.
Yep.
Yeah, in our case, we tested the upstream by building the branch, and I think actually I didn't test, so I can get the details. David in our team tested, and he said the file system PVC's backup worked as expected, and he's testing the block PVC, and he ran into some errors there as expected. Yeah.
I'm assuming that there's something off in my environment of the way we're setting it up, because again, it just isn't working at all from the beginning. And since Velero has been using Copia since 1.10, we just see on the OADP side. We were still focusing on restic, so we really haven't been supporting officially Copia or testing it. And so we're just now starting to do that. And so there may be some issues in the OADP environment where we just need to make sure that configuration-wise, there's something we're missing that, a pure Velero install has that should be a pretty simple fix, because obviously if this didn't work at all, we would have known about it by now, 2 releases in.
Right. Is it also the case that maybe the error message, any chance that it can be improved to give a little bit more information, or I don't know?
Quite possibly, because the issue here is, for example, it's there's in the init code, it's checking to see, it's going through and list, there's a copia list blobs call, and basically if that returns anything and it's not empty, then it returns this not empty error. So it might make sense to enhance that error to give some information as to, okay, for this first, in other words, if list blobs returns a bunch of things, at least give me some information about the first thing you found in the error message. That might help me to figure out what it is that we're dealing with.
Yeah. I mean, at least the count of the blobs, for example, or a little bit more.
Well, yeah, the count would work. Count would work too. So but it's basically something, because right now what it does is that, it just it uses the copia list blobs call and passes in a callback that always throws the same error. And so basically, if list blobs is empty, it returns nil. And if it's not empty, then it returns this predetermined error, for the first blob it finds, and then that's the end of it.
Yeah, and inside the logs, we see the make directory error, right? The /udm repo.
Right.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess if we can, it might be also helpful to kind of look at the, for a backup repository CR for a working installation, what is the actual spec, all the fields, to see if this, this restic stuff that we're seeing in there is unexpected. Also, I guess there's also a question. Shubham, for OADP, are we setting a prefix in the bucket that's not default? I don't remember. That Velero prefix, is that default, or is that a non-default value?
It's via configuration, right?
Right. I wonder if this is something where, but by default, is that empty, or is it
No, it's empty.
Velero?
Default is empty.
Yeah.
Oh, I wonder if there's something in the code that doesn't work if the prefix is not empty.
Possible, because we tested with brand new bucket and empty prefix.
Okay, got it. So it may be that the restic code is not looking in the prefix or something. I don't know. That's a possibility, at least. That may not be the case, but because that is one area where I know what we're doing is different than default.
This is where the automated tests will help. And I remember in previous meeting, the OADP team is working on some automated tests, right, for Velero?
Yeah, we have some automated testing already on the ODP side, and I know we were talking. I know we had some conversations to try to get some of that stream, but I'm not sure how far along that is right now.
Yeah, I mean, that would be good, right? We can various different combinations, like with prefix, without prefix.
Right.
Yeah.
And these are the kinds of things where, again, especially with options that not everybody uses, they're relatively uncommon, and so some new features is brought in and it works in all the defaults, and then we've tested certain commonly used options, but for example, this prefix may not be used very commonly. It was something that we added a while back because some of our migration use cases early on with MTC, we were using that bucket not just for Velero, but for storing image information, image streams from OpenShift. So we were hitting errors because there were these directories Velero wasn't expecting. So we added the prefix so that everything's under the prefix. And it may just be some of the copia code is not looking at that field or honoring it. So that is something to look into.
Yeah, and I love the prefix option because I have a single bucket that I use across different machines, different.
Yeah, exactly. So that's good. We just need to make sure that it works. And if that's the problem, that'll be a pretty easy fix.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Thank you. Next one on the list, we have Ansho.
Yeah. Maybe let me share the agenda screen.
Can you repeat the last thing, please?
I'm sharing my screen. Let me know if you
Okay.
folks can see it.
Thank you.
I hope you folks can see it. So basically, in terms of status updates, so I worked with Venkai. We tried out the Azure plugin in Azure National Clouds. There are certain configuration changes we need to set the cloud name and for these scenarios. We tried it out and it's working as expected. It was just a sanity test, and I think the VMware team was not able to get hands-on access to these. So we were able to validate at least for China Cloud for now, Azure China Cloud. Second, on the status update side, so the resource modifier or the JSON substitutions PR is checked in. This is a follow-on website, the docs PR. So just requesting the maintainers to review it. And third is the E2E test for resource modifier. It's in the works. I will kind of publish this by next week. I hope that should not be a blocker for the 1.12 release. I hope it's okay to be late binding this E2E tests. And last two are mainly discussion items. I'll probably park them since I think we have more agenda. We can discuss this towards the end. But the first is around the topic we discussed much like way back around how can we really make CSI snapshotting parallel in Velero's core code base when we invoke the plugin for snapshotting. We had certain limitation in terms of the current Velero flow, and we had 1.12 commitments for data mover. So we didn't really pick it up or think through what will be the actual solution for this. So maybe I wanted to bring this topic up. And second is around Tiger's PR for existing resource policy of recreate. Those, I think we have been discussing a lot of things in the comments. If we have time in this meeting, we can maybe discuss if folks have other thoughts or discuss more on it. So that is like top level for these two. We can pick this up towards the end when other folks are done with their agenda. Any thoughts, questions?
Yeah, I like the idea of parallelizing this volume snapshot, because even in our case, we see, especially in case of problems, it takes long time. So what is the idea? Are there any ideas how to parallelize?
So there are actually, Raghu, we discussed a lot of limitations that we have in the current code base. And basically, we don't really have the actual solution or how to fix it right now. This will kind of require inputs from the maintainers on what is the right way. Because, I'm just thinking maybe we can discuss this towards the end, if that's okay, Raghu. I think we'll go deep once you start.
No, that's fine.
Anyone else, folks? Any top level thoughts? Otherwise, we'll discuss these two at least, and these three I talked about. I'll stop presenting.
Thank you, Ansho. Next thing is I've finally managed to take the time to create the new reminders. I hope that fits all. I'll create 2 reminders, one 15 minutes before the meeting and one exactly on the time of meeting. Just FYI, if you miss that thing. The next one is Shubham.
Hello. Yeah. So I've been doing PR reviews and ads from the OEDP team. We are trying to integrate FS copy and DM copy data mover. So was trying that out. So that's it from my end.
Thank you. And on the discussion topics, I'm going on vacation in 1 week, but that means I have to skip few community meetings. So let me share that. I can set up the community meetings to be recorded automatically, and then I can just upload them to YouTube if needed, or someone can step in for me for these dates. So 8th of August, 22nd, and 5th of September to lead the meetings and record them. Anyone? Any volunteers?
Yeah,
Yeah.
if nobody steps in, I can do it. Hi, Wes. Are you volunteering? Yeah, then I'll let you go ahead. Yeah.
I don't have a dog in this fight. I don't think I can do the 8th, but I could do the 22nd.
I think I don't know about Scott. I am available.
Yeah, I'm available for if we want to split these up as well. Actually,
Yeah.
I think I should be available for any of them. So
Is that
Okay.
something that we can do ad hoc as we join, Orlin?
The thing is, you have to use that host key that I have to share prior with you, but it's perfectly fine everyone to use that key and to join and just hit record and deal with the session.
Can we send a key to maintainers?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. I was going to say it might be good for a couple of us to. I know in the past recently it's worked fine, but at one point I remember when I was trying to host it, and sometimes the code would work and sometimes it wouldn't, and so if a couple of us are available for that, then if it doesn't work for one of us, it will for the other. I don't know what was going on with the system that was like that, but maybe external people somehow it's a little bit less reliable. I don't know.
It was the first time, right, Scott? I think.
Yeah. The first couple times, like last year when we went through this, this was a problem. Basically every week, one of us couldn't do it, one of us could.
Yeah.
And then the most recent time that I hosted a month or two ago, it was fine. But so I don't know if this is one of these flakes where it sometimes happens, or if the problem's been fixed.
The thing is, since I'm the owner of that meeting, I should be online to be able to provide you with the new key.
Mhm.
But I'll try to figure out how we can set that as static host key, and I can share with everyone. Okay. Thanks for that. Next thing is for KubeCon Shanghai. The notification is in 6 days. So if you want, please drop me a line if your talk is accepted. So we can write up some blog post about it and our present on the KubeCon Shanghai. Same goes for KubeCon Chicago, but we have until 28th, I think, of August for the notifications. And about blog posts, do we need to drop some blogs or something more about 1.11.1 release? Is it something very significant in that release, or I suppose it's a patch release? So
I was looking at the changelog today. There's I think 5 or 6 bugs fixed. Some of them, edge cases. One of them there was one. Well, it was one with I think the more significant ones are involved. There was one about not non-running pods will no longer cause backup errors. I know that's one that on the OADP side we've actually had customers that have hit before, so that it's a bug fix. It's not a significant feature or anything, but and there was another one that I've seen before. There was an issue with progress updates.
Yeah, I think that's an
backups.
important one. They probably fixed that, and it's useful. Yeah.
Those are the 2 biggest ones. I think the other ones were smaller and minor fixes. Although I think there was an Azure plugin maybe there. I know there was a plugin related one as well. or rather a specific.
This
But
might
we-
be more of a tweet to look at the
Yes.
release notes versus
Yeah,
a blog post. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. I'm just
Yeah.
yeah.
Can-
Not sure if
Or-
we have like fixed something big in this one. So yeah, tweet and notification into the mailing list.
One,
Alright.
112 would be a good release for blog post.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely one.
112, yeah. Okay.
Is it 112 or are we still talking about August 30th? Or I remember in the dev channel, there was some discussion, somebody posted that the release candidate itself might be delayed or something, right? 1 or 2 weeks. A while back, I think. Somebody from China team, I think.
I think it's still 30th August, Raghu.
30th August, okay. All right.
Do we have that somewhere written? I'm
Wiki.
not sure.
In the
Okay.
wiki.
In the wiki? Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you say
the road. Yeah.
which you say
You want the link, Orlin?
was that now which date was that? August what?
30th August for GA.
38 what?
30th August for GA.
Sorry, I'm not hearing that well. I'm sorry for that. Give me a sec. Yeah. Okay. 38. Okay, so we have to figure out something like. Okay. 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 I'll try to fix that tomorrow. Tomorrow, next week. Okay, Raghu, you're next.
Okay. Yeah, the few things. One is that PR for the R label selector CLI that we submitted. I think Scott approved that, and quite a number of people really have been asking for this, even on the forums. Right, there is currently not an easy way to pass the label selectors. So I hope there'll be a second approval as well soon, and that can be merged. Right, and that's just wanted to bring it up. The second, this request came from somebody in the last couple of days back. Just wanted to run it by the team. So, and I think it's quite reasonable in the file system backups. You really don't need to have the mtdir volume backups, right? These are supposed to be temporary, ephemeral, and all that. And currently, there is no way to do that. So, what I'm thinking is it easy enough to add this kind of exclusion to resource policies, right? The resource policies currently have various ways of criteria such as capacity or even the driver, the type, and things like that. For example, NFS and CSI sections can be added to the resource policies.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if mtdir can be added to the resource policies, and based on that, can we skip?
Yeah, I don't know if it supports that currently. I think I would agree that that is the logical place for it. So I think it's worth, if it's something that you can try with what's there now, and if it works, that's great. And if it doesn't, I think that would be the obvious place to put support for that.
Okay, I'll try that. Yeah, it doesn't work currently, at least as per documentation. It's very explicit. It says documentation says only NFS and CSI types.
Okay, got it. Yes, but
Yeah.
so in that case, it's probably and again, I think that was the limited scope of the initial version of that.
Right.
But to me, at least, that's the logical place to put support. So it may just be fitting an issue in to add support for that would make sense.
Okay, I think so too. Yeah, I'll give it a try. And the last one is the block PVC. So we tried that, and what happens is that in the backup, I think it tries to bring back from the snapshot as a file system PVC. So that's where the problem currently is, and obviously that fades. So we are looking into that. So the non-block PVC, as I said already, with empty brand new bucket and no prefix, that is working. And for the block PVC, that's the error that we identified, and we'll see if we can fix that soon.
Yeah. Does it look like the backup actually works fine as is without any changes, or is that?
My guess is based on this error, if you just fix that the type, wherever the type somehow is coming as file system, it would probably proceed. But I think you wouldn't know unless you make that change and give it a try, right? So,
Yep.
Raghu, is that in the context of just a regular old CSI or volume backup, or is this data mover or?
But this is the data mover.
Okay,
Guys.
okay.
Yeah.
Um,
And I guess the related thing to figure out as part of this process would also be just if you use Copia file system, the Copia backup non-data mover, does that also work with block PVC? But I'm assuming that whatever needs to be fixed is going to be pretty similar for both because it's using the same infrastructure.
Probably not. Probably not,
no?
because
Okay.
in the case of file system backups, we already identified it doesn't work because you're looking at the one directory on the host, right? That directory is different.
Oh, right. Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, so that directory on the host issue is not going to be relevant in the data mover case then?
No, it wouldn't be because you are not accessing the host mounts at all, right? In the data mover case.
Okay. Got it.
You're directly mounting the snapshot as a new PVC and reading from the PVC. So I don't think it will be related at all.
Okay. Got it.
okay, maintainer's question to you is, if we're that close to possibly having block volumes work with data mover, is that something that we'd want to focus on and get into the 112 release and maybe even delay for a minute?
I think until we know exactly how much work it is, I mean, we know it's not there yet. We think it might be quick. I think, if we have a PR that works, that's fully functional, at a point where it doesn't affect the schedule, I think that's an obvious answer.
Yeah.
Is it worth delaying versus putting it in 1.12.1? That would probably be a larger conversation. I don't have a firm opinion there as to what makes more sense.
And Raghu, I don't see an issue or a PR on the block. Could we cast light on this? So
yeah, good point. Yeah, we are going to create an issue today. I'll create one. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome.
But we are actively working on it, so I would expect to have something very soon up. Yeah, the PR.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I'd say the sooner we can get a PR up, the more likely it is we can get it in the 1.12. I don't know that it makes sense to delay a release over it. So if we can get it early enough to not have to delay the release over it, that would be ideal. If it's a question of, okay, we now have a fix, but it jeopardizes the release, that's when we can have the conversation around, does it make sense in 1.12, or should we just make this the number one thing that we need in 1.12.1? Because
even before the PR, I would suggest, in my opinion, that we should have an issue.
Definitely. I'll create that issue because I know the error now, so I'll create issue today.
It will be easier to communicate with the Beijing team as well, and we could tag it for 112 beforehand.
Yeah, I think I'll create that issue and I'll ask you guys to assign that to David, who in the Cloudcaster team who's working on it, and then you can assign to him.
Thank you, Raghu.
Yeah,
that's cool news.
Well, I'm hoping I'll get those permissions sometime soon, but until then, I'm going to ask. Yeah, that's fine.
What permissions do you need?
To assign the issue to because we are working on a few issues. If I can assign the GitHub issue to Cloudcaster developers, I don't think I can do that now. Even approval of the, I don't know if I can approve the PR. Recently, I approved few documentation PRs, but approval in the sense I just said looks good to me, but I don't know if I can officially approve the good. So it'll be easier if I get those permissions.
Orlin, is that something you can look at?
I'm sorry, I got distracted.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sorry. And I'm so permissions in GitHub for non-maintainers.
Yeah, I can take that.
Thank you, Orlin.
We can create like a different group. So we want to introduce like a contributors kind of a layer of permissions, or what?
Yeah, permissions essentially to approve some PRs or assign issues to developers.
Not to in the context of merging,
right?
Just
so
moving the assignee.
Review labeling and assigning kind of stuff, not merging.
Yeah.
I think we can do that with proper grouping and like a new team and to add some folks in. Do we have an idea who wants to be, who will be in that group or with that?
Well, I
kind of
want
setup?
to be in that group. Raghu, this is Raghu. So yeah.
Okay, but we have to see how first that reflects the governance doc that we have in place.
Yeah,
I
sure.
can-
Yeah, take your time. Just
yeah.
wanted to bring it up. Yeah.
I'm not sure if the governance doc speaks to that level of
Yes.
detail.
Yeah, at all. But yeah, it's a good chance to update that thing anyway.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Raghu, you can tag us and we'll see.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's it. I'm done. All in.
Thank you. Anyone else wants to add something?
I think Anshul wanted to get back to the discussion, right? Few topics.
Yeah, I can jump into those if there's nothing else. Yeah, seems like okay. So yeah, so the first, I mean, I think I'll just directly speak. I highlighted the points. I'll give a quick recap as well. So the first issue I was talking about kind of resurfacing as we go towards 1.12, right? So it is about the snapshotting using the CSI plugin. Even with the data mover, I think and migrating the CSI plugin to BIA v2, the backup operation still is a very long. It takes a lot of long takes a long time, because in the core backup flow, we basically invoke the CSI snapshot and we wait for the snapshot handle to appear. And in the async flow of BIA v2 for CSI plugin, we wait for the ready to use condition. But in a very in a generic scenario, if you really see, getting the snapshot handle in certain scenarios can take time. For example, if the CSI driver is bottlenecked, it's genuinely has too many snapshots to deal with, or there are other performance issues going on in the cluster. We have personally seen this for a lot of our customers where they have large clusters running. So basically what ends up happening is a backup, let's say if it has 50 PVs and the CSI driver is not in a very good shape, in the worst case, it could take 15 to 10 minutes for the backup to complete, which is not really acceptable or good in terms of performance or good in terms of consistency of the overall backup. So we discussed various approaches of what if we kind of take all the snapshots at once and invoke them at once, and in the async workflow we track them. We discussed various approaches before 1.11, but just to highlight the few issues for folks in the call, right? So the PVC snapshot, I think as of today, is tied with the hooks. If you do a pre-hook, you take the PVC snapshot and then you do a post-hook. So in all logical sense, the snapshots have to complete before you kind of invoke the post-hooks. But if during that flow, right, like pre-hook snapshot, let's say 5 PVCs for a given deployment, and then post-hook, we could at least parallelize those calls, those 5 snapshots, if we could invoke through the CSI plugin at once and poll them in parallel. I think we will get a much better performance than we have today. So yeah, that is a conversation I wanted to start, but I think there might be concerns around the CSI plugin. How can it handle parallel calls? I am also not very sure. Like if we call the CSI plugin the execute phase 10 times instantly in 1 second, will it work properly? Because all those calls happen over gRPC and it's running as a separate init container. That is like one side of things. And second is I just want to get more thoughts from folks. What do you think about it, and how can we make this happen in some sense for the next release? Right. It's more of a brainstorming thing because I also don't have the answer. We discussed this at depth earlier as well. Yeah, go ahead, folks.
Yeah. Anshul, the logical thing to do, I think, as you said, is to group them at the pod level, because the hooks happen at the pod level, right? So you can snapshot multiple PVCs. And I think we should have a couple of configuration parameters there if some CSI drivers are not able to handle too much parallelism, right? So we can always introduce some number, right? How many parallel PVC snapshots you can handle. And default today is 1, right? That is what is happening now. And we can, the other extreme is all the PVCs for the given pod, whatever is that number we can issue in parallel. And users can always set that into somewhere in the middle number, right? So depending on how their CSI driver works. But given, apart from those configuration parameters, I think it's a good idea to issue the calls for all the PVCs for a given pod, because we have seen these backups take not just 10, 15 minutes. If the backup configuration is wrong, especially in case of Longhorn, for example, we have seen this, and you have like 20 PVCs and each is 10 minutes, right? And so basically the backup doesn't fail completely until those 20 PVCs one by one fail 10 minutes each timeout. And that's like a very bad UX. Yeah.
Maybe I'm missing something, but one thing we'll have to do is we'll have to change the whole plugin framework first if you want to work on multiple PVCs at the same time, right?
Can you highlight what is the change that is required, Shubham?
So
Maybe
basically,
I mean,
currently we go on a per PVC basis, right? The plugin execution is done per PVC basis. For each PVC, whenever you encounter, you create a snapshot on a high level, right? But we
Right.
want to do, like, let's say a list of PVCs, 10 PVCs, and then create 10 snapshot at the same time. So you will need a new plugin framework which has an execute method and which works on the list of PVCs at the
No,
concurrently
but
on.
Shubham, do you need to pass list? You can still make multiple calls, right?
Yeah,
no, but the polling, Raghu, the polling is done today. I think it's in the
per
CSI.
yeah, per
Oh,
VS
right.
encountered.
This,
Yeah.
yes, yes, I know.
So for that
Yeah.
as well, you'll need a list of volume snapshots plugin, right? The resource list. Currently, it's
Right.
just
But
a
but the
single.
problem with the list approach is that right now the CSI plugin just follows the existing framework. So for every resource that we back up or restore, regardless of the type, we run all the plugins that match. So you're going through PVCs and you're going through pods, but also because of the additional items functionality, you're doing the PVC, and then we return the volume snapshot, and we return the PV. And so so you kind of go down the tree for each one. I mean, I guess you could, instead of creating the snapshot, add something to a list as your plugin action somewhere, and then have some later action pulls that list and does something. But I don't know that. I mean, I think the idea of actually saying, okay, plugins are going to take a list. The problem is not just the plugins take one versus the list. Is the way plugins are called. It's not that we're saying, okay, I want to run this plugin. I want to run this plugin on this thing. You don't start with the plugin and then call individually on the individual items that plugin matches. Rather, you back up an item, and as part of backing up that item, you call all the plugins that match that item. And
Right.
if you have additional items returned, then you back up those additional items, and for each one, you call the plugins on the items. So you kind of have that chain that goes down. So that whole framework doesn't really work at all with the idea of actions that apply to a bunch of things at once.
So
Actually,
maybe
sorry, go ahead. Anshu. Yeah.
I was just saying, like, maybe just to think from a very different angle, right? What do you folks think about special casing CSI snapshotting? I mean, we had this discussions earlier as well, and CSI is here to stay in the long run, right? Like not one
Right,
month.
right.
Moving it to core Velero backup controller or
Correct.
something.
In those
Yeah.
cases, we can achieve all those functionalities, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
agree with that.
in that case, what you would probably do is, I mean, basically, you would probably have to. I mean, even there, I mean, even if you made it core, it would, you might be. I mean, it would still be a lot of. I guess the first change would be to just say, okay, I guess is the last thing you do before you save. Because we already have special casing, for example, other things. Oh, if it's a pod, then you do this thing, and so there would be some code right before the create call to say, oh, if it's a PVC and it's CSI, then do this thing. I just don't know. I mean, it depends on whether that action that you're trying to take is something that you can do at the end after all the other plugins run, because you still have to do all this additional item stuff where, because if you're creating all these snapshots at once, then you have to then add these snapshots to the backup, which right now we're using the plugin framework to do for us. Because once you create the volume snapshot, then you add that in the backup right now in the plugin as an additional item. And then the volume snapshot has a plugin, which then pulls in the volume snapshot content. So that's a lot of infrastructure that you'd have to basically recreate from scratch if you were to do this. Because right now, it all just uses the plugin framework, because the plugin framework provides an easy way of saying this item needs that item and that item needs this other item, and they all get pulled into the backup for you.
We could use the finalizing phase.
No, we can't show them, right? That's what we discussed. We need the handle up front because we have run pre-hooks and we need to run post-hooks only after the snapshotting is complete. So BIV doesn't exactly help with this particular issue.
No, not BIV2. I'm talking in the controller's finalizing phase. We could we do a second patch to S3, right?
But I mean, you still have that whole infrastructure that you would have to recreate of.
Yeah, we need to. That's true.
Yeah, because again, right now it just goes down the chain of, I'm backing up a PVC. That means I need to pull in the PV. That means I also need to create a volume snapshot. And then there's a volume snapshot plugin, which pulls in the volume snapshot content. And, if we were going to pull that out of the plugin framework, then that special casing of if it's a PVC would then need to do all of that manually.
Right, but considering that CSI is the core of the backup, right? You want to back up.
Right. But what I mean is, I just mean that we'd have to duplicate that same kind of logic. Right now, the plugin framework has this logic around this thing needs that thing and that thing needs the other thing, and we'd have to build in the similar logic but specialized to PVCs to say, okay, I need to create the volume snapshot and then I need to back that up, but then I need to call plugins on that thing. Because everything that gets backed up has plugins that could run on it. So, that would all have to be duplicated in the core Velero code to sort of get all those things done.
Yeah. And even today, there is a little bit of logic in the main controller already for CSI. It's kind of split between.
Oh, yeah, there is. And there's a bunch of logic for Rustic. Yeah. And so, there's a bunch of places where I guess my only concern is we'd have to duplicate a lot of logic there, but if we're getting something out of it, the other thing is that the backup controller is already pretty complicated. The IDA backuper, has a bunch of things and a bunch of special cases, and if we were to pull CSI into that would just add more code to that and possibly make it more difficult to follow unless we, but that could be worked out with just doing it right. But we'd have to be clear that this is providing a clear advantage that we can't get otherwise, and then we can find a way to make it work. But there's a lot of edge cases we'd have to make sure we covered because whatever things that we're creating there manually, we still need to make sure those then run through the item backup process completely.
Yeah, and but I think even if you want to use the plugin, Anshul, is there any way that instead of waiting synchronously, right, for the snapshot handle, can the asynchronous progress reporting mechanism be used to report back?
Yeah, that's what I called out, Raghu, right? So at least waiting for the snapshot handle has to happen synchronously because you are you're executing pre-hooks and you have to execute post-hooks only when the operation is done. If you do it async,
no, you can still call the snapshot of multiple PVCs as long as they're all in the same pod, because you're not going to run post hook until all the PVCs are done, right?
Okay, so I still didn't get what you mean to say.
So what I'm saying is that there are 10 PVCs, for example. Today, what is happening is that the snapshot happens for the first PVC, then we wait for the snapshot handle to be ready synchronously, and then it comes back, the second PVC is issued. What I was saying is that for these 10 PVCs, we don't have to wait for the snapshot handle synchronously. It can come back after the 10 PVCs are done using this asynchronous mechanism, right? The backup controller can wait there until the snapshot handle is ready for all of them.
Well, the asynchronous mechanism means the backup controller is not waiting. When you use the asynchronous mechanism, we don't come back until the finalized phase. So if a plugin returns synchronously with the asynchronous operation happening in the background, we go and finish the entire backup and then come back and check on it. All the pods, everything else.
Okay, so that maybe so one option could be somehow to tweak or maybe think about some kind of asynchronous mechanism, right? Instead of synchronous wait. but still have control in the main controller, not till the end, but somewhere in the middle. Anyway, I know this is vague. I'll have to read up a little bit more on the current asynchronous mechanism. Then I can come back with more concrete suggestion.
Hey, folks, one more thought based on what Raghu said, right? Scott, what if, let's say we get that 10 PVC list, we don't change the plugin framework, we just call the CSI plugin 10 times at that point in time at once, instead of doing it once, waiting for it and going to the next?
Yeah.
Do you
Okay.
see any
I guess the
limitations?
question is, how do you communicate to, because so basically what's happening then is that you're going through, so you're back. So the order here is that I'm trying to remember. So I guess we back up a pod, and then that pod returns the list of PVCs as additional items. Is that the sequence
Yeah,
here?
I think so. That was the case. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have this list of 10 PVCs, and we're returning them as additional items. Now each item, each PVC we just call backup item PVC. That PVC, when we call the plugin on that PVC, it will have a reference to the PVC. It will also have a reference to the backup. It doesn't have a list, so we'd have to find a way to communicate this list of 10 PVCs and the status of, because the framework doesn't have a specific parameter for that.
No, I'm just okay. Let's maybe I'll just ask this one question. I understand, like in the code, how do we fit it? I think that's a question you need to see. But let's say, for example, we can invoke 10 snapshots at once. We can take 10 PVCs and call the CSI plugin at once for all 10. Do you see any scale limitations or any issues arising with 10 concurrent calls to the plugin, the execute phase? 10 execute calls to the CSI plugin at once. Do you see a concern there?
So I'm not sure that's. I'm actually thinking, again, if you're talking about trying to figure out a way to make use of the existing plugin API, it might be easier not to think of it as 10 different calls to the plugin, but as, because 10 calls to the plugin would mean, the existing plugin would mean whatever additional items are being returned from that plugin would then have to be processed by the backup controller. So again, that wouldn't be concurrent because we'd have to, because the backup controller itself is going through all this stuff, in a single thread. It would almost need to be one call to the plugin that then somehow worked on 10. I mean, just thinking the backup controller itself is not running in 10 threads, so 10 concurrent calls is not really going to work, given that that plugin is returning items that then need to be backed up as well. So it may be the case where, if you have a list of 10 PVCs, yeah. So I guess that's the hard part, is because if you want 10 calls at once. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like maybe what you'd want is because I was going to say, if the plugin could call and start something asynchronously and they have something that waited, but again, if you somehow knew that this was the 10th call and therefore this one should wait synchronously for all 10 to be returned, but the challenge there would be how do you know what all those, because you also have these additional, the volume snapshots and the so you're I don't know how that's going to work in terms of the framework.
Okay.
Anshul, maybe we can. I'm happy to work with you on this one, and maybe we can present more concrete proposals.
Actually, here's a possibility. I just thought of something. Instead of a PVC plugin that acts on this PVC and then creates the volume snapshots, what if you what if you created a CSI pod plugin that listed the PVCs, pulled them from the cluster, started the snapshot process, and just handled it all at a pod plugin? In other words, instead of the pod plugin returning the PVCs and then calling for each PVC, each plugin, what if the pod plugin ran the snapshots
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
and
that
then
would work.
returned a list of all those volume snapshots as its additional items? I don't know that because you're saying at the pod level you want to do all these things
Yeah.
at once. So maybe it should be a pod plugin that lists the PVCs, and then instead of just returning those PVCs as additional items, it actually starts the snapshots there.
Tiger actually put a good point on the chat. What about podless PVCs? I mean, technically, like the ideal solution will be we pick all these podless PVCs and do them all in parallel. But again, what will be the code flow that invokes them is the
Right.
question again.
I mean, I don't know. In most cases where you have a bunch of PVCs and you're running into scaling issues, is it more common to have a bunch of PVCs that are mounted or a bunch of PVCs that are not currently mounted?
Yeah,
I don't think
it's an uncommon situation, and even today, let's call this unattached PVCs, right? They don't work. The file system backup won't work with this because they're not mounted in.
Right. But the CSI
Snapshots would work.
approach will snapshots work. And you know, for example, you know, I guess one use case here would be, you know, you've got a cron job that creates a job pod, you know, once a day and has and its logs go to this PVC that it remounts every time. You still want that backed up. And yeah, file system backup does not back it up, and that's a downside. But data mover would back that up because it's using based on CSI. But again, if that's an edge case, that's, you know, if you have someone with hundreds of volumes, chances are those are not majority unmounted. I think in this case, if you were to have a pod plugin that did the PVCs in parallel, then you would still have the PVC plugin, which would say, hey, is there a pod already handling this? If so, don't do anything. If there's not a pod handling this, then you do what you're doing now, and then have the pod plugin take on that snapshotting work so that it can do this in parallel, or at least kick those off and then go back and loop over and wait for them all to be done, or rather to all have snap handles. So I think the pod plugin may be the only way to do all the PVCs for a pod at once. You know, in terms of the snap handle thing, I just don't, and that would work within the existing framework, probably. So I think that's probably the best option there without a major change to the backup architecture.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think, yeah, that sounds good. Check on that.
Hey, I also want to quickly bring up in the same context, I've seen some issue about the performance, improving the performance for the node agent backups, right? Even in the new data mover, how much parallelism is there? For example, in the current node agent, I think one node agent is handling everything. So I've seen one issue, can we use Kubernetes jobs to parallelize this a little bit more? How does the new data mover work? Things happen in parallel there?
Yeah, and that's actually, we've had a conversation even internally at Red Hat about this. So in terms of the transition from, because for example, our OADP data mover that we you know, using this not part of this that we're eventually trying to move away from, but you know, that's run in a single pod, but then we run multiple, you know, say 10 to 15 in parallel there, where we kind of limit, and the switch to the Velero data mover is based on the node agent. So if you have a cluster with many nodes, then you're getting, because right now we're just doing one job, but it's, you know, one upload at a time per node for node agent. So if you have, you know, 20 nodes in your cluster, then, you know, you're getting a fair amount of parallelism. But if you've got a small cluster with, you know, 2 or 3 nodes and a bunch of volumes, then you're getting a lot of throughput. And that's something, I think there's no inherent design reason why we can't increase that. And just previous conversations with other maintainers was more a question of testing and confidence. It's one of the things that, you know, in the time frame of 1.12, they didn't really have time to fully work out if there are any threading issues to you know, increase that beyond 1. I think the hope is very much, certainly on our side, that we would like to make that configurable to allow it, you know, to say, okay, instead of just 1 per node, we want, you know, 3 or 4 per node or 5 or whatever. I just think the work to get there is, first of all, to change 1 to 2 and test it out and work through any threading bugs that we run into if we have any problems. And if we fix any problems or there are no problems and it's stable with, multiple in parallel, then we just need to add a configuration parameter server arg to configure that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that will not be in 1.12. I'd like to see it in 1.12.1, but I don't know. If it's a new parameter, that's another thing. Is that going to patch release, or is that? I'm not sure. But that's where we are with that. Is that 1.12 will not? It'll just be one upload per node agent pod. So you get some parallelism if you have a bunch of nodes. Otherwise, there's room for improvement.
Okay, got it.
Just great. Thanks a lot for that idea. I think we'll think on it and come back. Raghu, see if you can also add any thoughts on the pod design. We'll maybe discuss.
We'll do.
Just one thing to keep in mind is that basically if you're using pod instead of PVC, that pod plugin would need to basically do everything the PVC's plugin is doing for all the all those mounted PVCs, and then also the PVC plugin would need to kind of work. Basically, we need to have some way of determining what makes a PVC handled by the pod, and so the PVC plugin can do the reverse that and saying, okay, pod's handling this, I'm not going to do anything here, versus this is a unconnected pod, it's not being done, let's do this. And then we just need to make sure that basically every PVC gets handled, and also no PVC gets handled twice.
Yeah.
That's going to be probably one of the challenges there. Because
Oh,
in other words, we don't want to lose that use case of all of a sudden now this only works for pod mounted PVCs, because we definitely want that still to work on all the PVCs.
I mean, only recently there was this user who was asking about these unattached PVCs, because it was a curious case. An app is coming up, dumping some data on the PVC, and then removing the attachment, and so as a scheduled thing. So that's why he wanted to know whether he can back up unattached PVCs, and I think finally he agreed he will do something to mount it for the time of backup. Yeah.
Right. And again, for the files as the backup right now, that doesn't, we can't handle it because of the whole mounting issue and using that for Copia. But for the CSI and the data mover, we shouldn't need to have that mounted. So we just need to make sure we don't break that use case for CSI.
Yeah.
Great. This is great discussion. Thanks for this. I also had the second discussion topic, but I think we're already out of time. Maybe I think Tiger, if you want to discuss anything over chat, we can also sync there. We have a lot of comments on the PR. If I think we can get together to finalize if we need something, we need to pause on this or take this in a different direction. Just wanted to discuss that in the forum, but yeah, I don't think we have time for that today. The recreate option PR.
Yep, we can do that in Slack. Velero dash, right? Yeah.
Right.
Sounds good.
Thank you, folks.
All in left. So Scott, you're the co-host now.
Yeah, I saw that. So are we done with topics then? So I will stop the recording. Thanks all again for joining. Next week at the usual Beijing friendly time zone, and otherwise back at this time in 2 weeks. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.